Hello Misfits and welcome. In today's video we're talking about 5 reasons why you should be a dungeon master. I think many of us at some point or another have thought about it. Should we be the one in charge? If you're a brand new player and you don't have any experience in that area, you're probably wondering, do I have what it takes to be the person in charge, the game master, the dungeon master? If you've never played ever and you want to get into it, you're probably wondering if dungeon mastering, game mastering is something that you could do. So let's go over my 5 reasons why you should. Let's get into it. So number 1, the reason why you should be a game master is so that you can play. A lot of people that are getting into ttrpgs will struggle to find a group to play with and a table to sit at. It's the number 1 thing that I see when people are posting and asking for advice and help. It's, how do I get a group? How do I find a table? There are less game masters than there are players. So if you decide to take on the role of dungeon master or game master, you can create your table. You don't have to go find one to sit at. You still have to find people to, populate your table, but it's going to be a lot easier because people are more willing to do the game and join in if they're not the one that's in charge, So a big reason why you should be a dungeon master is just so you increase your chances of getting to play. And I can't tell you how many groups start out that way, where nobody really wants to be the dungeon master, but somebody just decides that they'll do it just so that you can play. That's kind of how ours went. None of us really had the experience or felt qualified to do it, and then one of us was just, well, I'll give it a shot. I know a little bit about role-playing games, so I'll take the DM seat and we'll see if that works for us. And it doesn't have to be your spot that you're stuck in forever. You can just try it out and see how it feels. Number 2, another great reason why you should be a dungeon master is for escapism. So many of us love games like D&D and Pathfinder and Call of Cthulhu because we get to jump into these different worlds that are so different from our own. We get to escape into this fantasy, this alternate reality. And the wonderful thing about being a game master is you don't have to wait for the session to roll around to do that. Anytime you sit down to plan and prepare, you get to dive into that world. Whether it's one that you've created yourself or it's a published module that you're trying to prepare and flesh out, you get to jump in there anytime you're sitting down to think about the next session or sessions that are coming up. You don't have to wait for your group of 3+ or 5+ individuals to dive into Faerun or wherever you are. And that is an aspect of being a DM that appeals to me so much. I just love getting to jump into these stories and these other worlds, and I'm glad that I don't have to wait until that one day every week or every other week, depending, to do that. So that's something that I really like about being a dungeon master. Number 3, you get to be in charge. I know this is kind of a weird one, but there is some big appeal about being in charge, particularly for those of you that are like me that hate group projects. We don't really like having to work with other people generally when we're working on a project. So it's kind of weird that we're in this game, this sort of type of game that involves groups. But group projects tend to work a little better when you have somebody that is leading and somebody that is in charge. And that's the nice thing about being the dungeon master. You kind of get to choose who you delegate what tasks to. You can tell people what to do, and you can lead them in the right direction. You can be as organized or as disorganized as you want because it's your table and you're calling the shots. Now, I will put a little caveat on this. While it's great to be in charge, don't let the power go to your head. I think bad tables are the ones where they are led by people that do not listen to the people sitting at the table. They are led by people that are inflexible and narrow-minded. So make sure that if you are going to take on this leadership role, that you're a good leader. You listen to what your players want and what they need, and you know when to have a little bit more of a heavy hand in things and when to back off and kind of let the game sort of run itself. I think that's really, really important. So, nice to be in charge. Take it with a grain of salt. Don't get a god complex about it. Number 4, something that's really cool about being a dungeon master that I think people don't realize is it's not nearly as structured or difficult as it sounds. A lot of people get intimidated by the role of being a dungeon master because there's all these rules and things that we have to keep track of. But in actuality, you don't have to know all the things. You get to fake it till you make it. Rules are important. We like the structure it brings to the game. It's how the game sort of runs smoothly because we have all of these things that we can look at and rely on and refer to when we're unsure of what to do. But when you're the dungeon master, you can decide what rules you're going to ignore and what rules you're going to adhere to. You can decide which rules we're going to bend a little bit and be a little bit more creative with. And that's really, really important. And if somebody asks you a question on the fly and you don't know and you don't have the time to look it up, make it up. Come up with an answer. Now, I would like to point out, if you are going to make things up and kind of throw the rule book out the window, make sure that whatever you decide on you stick to, so that you've got a little bit of structure for your players to rely on, and make sure that you're transparent with your players and everybody's aware of what's going on and is on the same page, okay? We don't want to, invite all these people to our table thinking that we're going to play the game and we're going to follow the rules the way they're written, and then they get there and you're not doing any of that. That's kind of a jerk move. So make sure everybody's aware of what's going on. But yeah, because you're in charge, you get to decide what you're going to use and what you're not going to use. If you don't like a rule, you can change it. If you don't remember a rule, you can make one up. The players have to adhere to the rules a little bit more strictly. They have all these different sort of specifications and guidelines for their characters that they act within. But when you're presenting them with problems and monsters and scenarios, you have a little less structure there. You're sort of coming up with stuff, more of your pure creativity, and can kind of mess around and play with things. You can change up your monsters and your NPCs to be different from the stat blocks in the published books and found online. It's the players that have to sort of work within the rules a little bit more. You have a bit more creativity there, and yeah, that's something that's really, really nice. And I think people forget that. They see all those rules and guidelines. They think you have to know everything. You don't. I don't know everything. I still am looking up conditions, and I've been DMing for years, so it's okay. And I still make stuff up on the fly, and we roll with it. That's just sort of how the game works, and that's kind of the beauty of being the Dungeon Master. Number 5, you get to be creative. Whether you are playing a homebrew campaign or playing out a published module, you get to put your spin on things. You get to be as creative as you want. You can build entire kingdoms and races and classes, or you can just tweak and modify what's already been made and published. It is your domain, and you can be as crazy with it or as sort of constricted as you want. And that's something that I have always found joy in when it comes to being a game master. And I think that's what a lot of people enjoy too. The sky's the limit. You don't have to limit anything to any sort of guideline, really, when it comes to creating a world. You can come up with anything. As long as you can imagine it, you can make it happen. And I think that's pretty cool. And don't think that running a published module means that you have less creativity. Actually, I would argue that if you are running a published module exactly as it's written, and you never make up anything or adjust anything, then your table is probably playing the game wrong. Because I think most of us that are game masters and dungeon masters can think of scenarios in which we had to change or alter things as they were written because of the crazy ideas our players came up with. When I did Curse of Strahd, we changed countless things about that campaign. I was constantly adding things or taking things out and really made it my own, and that's why we enjoyed it. And I think that's how most people find or experience those published modules. They enjoy them so much because of the changes and the things that they add or take away. And with a homebrew campaign, I mean, it's all on you. You can be as creative as you want. Yeah, and I think that's just sort of the beauty of the game. Yeah, so these are 5 reasons why you should be a dungeon master, or game master, depending on what system you are playing in. Really, there can never be too few dungeon masters. We always need more, and that's how this game sort of thrives and expands, by having more people that are willing to learn how to run the game. I think a lot of us get really intimidated by the role of dungeon master. Being in charge, creating things, planning sessions, figuring out how to deal with player choices. But really, it's not as bad as like it sounds. It's not as crazy or as stressful as it sounds, because in essence, you're supposed to be having fun. So as long as you're all sitting at the table and like having a good time, yeah, maybe some crazy stuff happens that you didn't account for, but use your creativity, escape into that world, take charge, and you'll work it out. It'll be fine, and nobody's gonna like punish you for taking 30 seconds longer to think of a response as an NPC. And if they are giving you a hard time about stuff like that, then kick them out of your table, because they're just being rude. But yeah, I think it's become this sort of big intimidating thing, but we need more dungeon masters. We do. And it's really not as stressful or scary. And, especially if you're trying to be a dungeon master at a table where there are people that are sitting at the table that have run the game before, a lot of them are just happy to be a player and happy to be playing the game, period. So they're going to give you a lot of grace. If you're a whole group of newbies, you're all going to be giving each other a lot of grace and leeway in the mistakes you will make and stumble through. It's just important to try it. Never rule out trying it, because that's what sort of gets people. They're like, I don't know if I could handle it. I just won't ever try it. I'm constantly begging my players to give it a shot, because it's not as stressful as they think. And several of them have. I'm still working on a few. I'm gonna get them. It's gonna happen one day. I will annoy them until eventually they agree to attempt it. But yeah, just give it a shot. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please feel free to like and subscribe. That really helps me out. But more importantly, leave me a comment down below. Tell me about some reasons why you enjoy being a dungeon master. These are honestly all the reasons why I love it. But tell me about some of the reasons why you love it and why you think it's so important that we encourage other people to run these games. With all of that out of the way, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful week, and I will see you again next time. Oh my gosh, I feel like I need to talk a little bit about the last session I ran for my group. I think I spent almost the entire session with my head in my hands, talking about being a dungeon master and having to roll with the punches and, adapt to player choices. I presented them with a problem, and I knew that they would want to solve it immediately. And I would not know exactly how they intended to solve that problem. But, yeah, I mean, talking like, briefly contemplating piracy, roping in NPCs that I didn't even think about into the situation, and like, sort of sweet-talking them into helping, involving other people that aren't really related to the issue and having to bring a lot of people into the fold. And now, I think now they're contemplating, like, breaking into a location. Players are always going to do things that you're not expecting. And despite how, like, just in total shock I was the entire session, I was also laughing, like, the entire time. I think there's a moment where I had to mute my mic so I could just put my face in my hands and start laughing. Those things I just love. I love seeing what my players are going to do, and how they intend to solve a problem. Because it's never going to be what I expect. And I think this is the thing that, like, scares a lot of people. They're scared of giving players options and choices because they don't know how they're going to react to them. But the only way you're going to figure out how you're going to react to them is through experience and practice. Nobody can tell you, like, how to respond to the crazy stuff your players are going to do. You're just gonna have to try it and see what happens. But, it was fun. I was stressed, and confused for most of the session. I think this was episode 34, so if you follow my campaign, it's that one. But it's pretty quick that I just start facepalming, so, you know, check it out if you want to. But yeah, tell me a little bit about some sessions in which you were stumped as a DM. Tell me about it. I'd love to hear about it. Anyway, have a good day, guys.